Welcome to the Fight with Depression. My name is Christopher Boussard, firefighter and author of The Fight, My Battle with Depression. Welcome, and thank you for joining me on The Fight with Depression, the podcast where I speak honestly about the reality of mental illness. If you listened to my last podcast episode on perseverance, I spoke about not needing these episodes to be perfect. And I'm going to continue with that and try and not feel like I have to make these absolutely perfect. So please bear with me, and I'm hoping to get better as I go. So first, before I start, I want to just say thank you to all my listeners. Thank you for listening to this podcast. I have people listening in North and South America, Europe, Asia. I've got people who follow my blog in Australia as well, and in Africa. So I just want to tell everybody thank you for your support. Thank you for listening. Thank you for following my blog. If you like the podcast, please share. Hopefully someone will benefit from it. Hopefully somebody will find it helpful. And I mean, we never know who we're going to help in our lives. So again, thank you very much for your support. And I may revisit today's topic at a later date with some more research-based information. But for this episode, I'd like to speak more from the heart. And I just want to say I'm not speaking about this because I have mastered it. I'm not an expert. And I'm also addressing myself. I'm speaking with you. I'm not speaking to you. Same as my other topics. I'm not speaking like I'm a master of this. These are the things that I need to work on as well. So we all have something that we avoid for one reason or another. Question is what are you avoiding and why? And then we're going to look at what happens when we avoid something for too long. We tend to have certain aspects or circumstances in our lives that we try to avoid. And then there are other things that we try and address head on. Some of this may be confrontation, trauma from past events, or anything that's ongoing, responsibility, personal responsibility, hard work, giving, generosity, emotion, or asking for help. I know this is a very broad topic. Hopefully I'll speak more in depth in future podcasts, but I'm just going to speak from a broad stance of just avoiding things in general. So before I start, I want to start off by addressing my own faults. So for me personally, I avoid confrontation, and I avoid putting myself in a place or situation where I feel uncomfortable. And when I say confrontation, I'm not speaking about like a physical confrontation or argument or anything like that. And not confrontation when it's initiated by somebody else. But I don't generally initiate confrontation myself. And this could be something such as just inviting somebody somewhere. That's confronting somebody at all. So, asking somebody for help or anything like that. I also avoid situations where I'm going to feel uncomfortable, such as the grocery store, public places, or a situation where I'm likely to fail. I personally don't avoid hard work or manual labor. Some of those I tend to thrive on, and I often seek it out. I tend to push myself, but then I get very discouraged. So a little story. Early in our relationship with my wife, before we got married, before we got engaged, very early on, she asked me why I don't buy her flowers. And my response was, when you're running a marathon, you don't start off by sprinting. And this prompted her several years later to remind me of my comment. And she came back and said, well, maybe you should try jogging once in a while. So well played, Molly. instead of going to the store and buying her flowers, which many people would do, but instead I built retaining walls, complete with proper drainage and everything. I've done this before, and I made sure I did it right. And I planted some rose bushes. Now, I personally feel like it means more to have flowers planted than going to the store and buying them. But all she really wanted was an occasional flower to make her feel special. Somebody did something for her. Somebody got her something that she enjoys. But for me, I did the manual work. I did all the labor. I put the retaining walls in. I tore out all the rock. I leveled the ground. I put in the drainage. I did all this to avoid feeling uncomfortable going to the store and buying flowers. Is it my pride? Is it because I don't want to go to a public location? But I was willing to put all the hard work and effort into something just so I could avoid a situation where I would be uncomfortable. So the question is, what lengths do you go to in order to avoid something? And at what cost? And are you willing to hurt somebody else because of it? So why do we avoid things? Is it pride, fear, uncomfortable? We want the easy way. Something's too difficult. We feel overwhelmed. Our pride says that we don't want to show weakness or admit we're wrong. The fear of what's going to happen. Will I get hurt? Will I look bad? Will I hurt somebody else? You get overwhelmed and start to shut down. This is a big thing with me. Or do we just put minimal effort into things because we think it's going to be too difficult? We avoid hard work and we avoid putting ourselves out there. But we make excuses for why we're avoiding something. We say that we don't have any time, we don't have enough money, we don't have all of the information that we need, or we don't have the understanding, or we just say that we don't want to hurt someone else. And Brian Buffini talks about this in his podcast, It's a Good Life. Season 2, episode 41, talks about making excuses. And he talks about Jocko, and he actually previously did an interview with Jocko Willink and speaks about ownership. So what excuses are we trying to make? And really all we do when we're avoiding something is we make excuses. We say that we don't want to do something because it's going to hurt somebody or something else, but the reality is that we're just afraid. We're afraid of what's going to happen. And in order to avoid our lives and avoid our reality, the reality of what could happen, the reality of the unknown, we find other things to do. We watch TV. We're constantly on our phones, constantly accessing social media. We want to live vicariously through other people on social media, or it's just to get on there to critique them as a way to avoid our own faults. Or we even go to drugs and alcohol. So in the fire department, I'm part of the peer support team. And what that is a group of individuals who we just provide support for anybody on the department who needs it. Anybody who ran a bad call or is having a hard time at home, they need somebody to talk to, they need somebody to reach out to, and we can even set them up with different counselors and stuff like that. But a lot of it's just somebody to talk to. And since starting the peer support team, we talk to other departments around the area, and one of the big issues that people have with the peer support teams is people say we don't need it. We haven't had them in the past, and people are just getting soft. There's no reason to have a peer support team. I've been in the fire service for almost 20 years now, and I can definitely tell you it's needed. And I tell people all the time who say, well, we didn't have a peer support team in the past. So we didn't have a team, but we provided peer support. It looks different. Because what we used to do is we would run a bad call and we'd talk about it on the way back to the station or at the station. When you got back to the station, people were talking. We would get together and we would communicate, even not about calls, but about our lives. Talk to each other about anything that's going on, and we would get that information out. But what happens now is on our way back from the call, people get on their phones and they're looking at social media, they're texting people, or when we get back to the station, instead of sitting around the table and just conversing, everybody's on their phone. You sit around watching TV, or you sit down to eat a meal and everybody's has their phones out. We don't converse the way that we used to anymore. And I was listening to the radio the other day, and they were talking about the new generation using emojis to show emotion. And that's their way because, people avoid eye contact and everything. But this isn't good. Avoiding interaction with everybody isn't a good thing. And accommodating those by allowing people to get their feelings out or get their emotions out by sending an emoji doesn't make up for that human contact, by that interaction with everybody. And occasionally our problems will go away if we avoid them long enough, but most of the time they just wait for us. We want to run away from our problems, and I talk about that. I joke with my wife about it. I say joke, I semi-joke with her, because I do. It would be nice to run away from your problems, but our problems follow us. And I've talked about this before. When we try and avoid our problems, they just keep building up. I spoke with my buddy Jordan about it, and hopefully I'm going to have him on a future episode. But he said, sometimes we want to just get away and avoid everything, but that's not what we're called to do. We're called to help people. I would love to avoid doing these podcasts, doing blogs, because it is difficult sometimes. It forces me to analyze my own life. It forces me to confront the issues that I have. So yeah, it would be easier for me to completely avoid doing these. It's harder for me to try and reach out to people because I get discouraged, because I want more people to listen, or I want more people to read my blog. I want more feedback. I want more information, and I start getting discouraged. So it would be easy for me to give up. But that's not what we're called to do. We're not called to give up when things get hard. So I constantly remind myself of what Jordan said, that yeah, it's easy it would be nice to avoid things and just get away, but we have to do the right thing. So what happens when we avoid something for too long? When we avoid confrontation, you're really the one who suffers. The other person most likely doesn't know and isn't affected by what's bothering you. If you don't ask for help, how do other people know that you need it? When you avoid helping others, who will help you? People often avoid helping those who refuse to help anyone else. When you avoid hard work, somebody else has to do it. And a lot of people aren't bothered by that, but there's often somebody looking to benefit from your missed opportunities and to take your reward. We were looking for somebody to help us with our backyard, and we called several companies. Some people didn't even call back. A couple of them came out and just tried to avoid it. But they made excuses for why they weren't able to help us. And I could go into detail about what really needed to be done, but the reality was that it was too much work for them. They wanted to do less for more. And it's easy to completely lay in a new sprinkler system than to tear one out and put a new one in. They just didn't want to do the work. So what happened was I ended up doing a lot of this work on my own. We had somebody who was willing to do the work, And I ended up just putting in a fire pit on my own. And for me, that actually was more beneficial because I was able to accomplish that task and not rely on somebody else to do it. There's some things that when you avoid for too long, it builds up and your cup overflows. We need a pressure relief valve. And, the way I think of it as an air brake system. You hear a big truck running and it's constantly letting off the pressure. It's because it's building up air pressure. And if it doesn't relieve that, then something's going to blow. And we're the same way. We have to have a pressure relief valve. If we just allow things to build up and build up, then who knows how it's going to be released. It needs to be a controlled release, a controlled pressure relief valve. So my high school math teacher told a story about his son. He said his son kept having nightmares. And what they found out was that when they spoke with him about his day before going to bed, the nightmares stopped. And it wasn't anything bad about his day. He wasn't having problems. He wasn't getting picked on or anything. But his brain just had an overwhelming amount of information that he needed to process. And by speaking about it, his brain was able to relax and to analyze the information that he took in through the day. And he stopped having nightmares. But I think it's important to ask yourself, has avoiding something ever caused you to be happy? Or has it resulted in missed opportunities and regret? I can't think of times where I have avoided something that I didn't want to do or avoided confrontation where I'm glad that I did. I look back and I think, well, if only I had taken that opportunity. Sometimes in our lives, we have those that are just kind of forced on us and we're forced to take action. And if you've read my book, you know the story about how my wife and I met. And I wanted to speak with her very bad, but I was avoiding it. I was avoiding confrontation. I tried to speak with her and, one thing happened or another and I was feeling uncomfortable. But like I said, sometimes things are forced on us. She actually initiated our meeting and all I had to do was raise my hand. And nearly 20 years later, we're still married. But I could very easily be telling you about a missed opportunity that I had because of something I was avoiding. I was avoiding feeling uncomfortable. I was avoiding the possibility of rejection. And lucky for me, that story doesn't end with a missed opportunity or regret. But more often than not, I think about the situations where I've avoided and wished that I had done something. When have I seen somebody else in need and wished that I stopped to help? So then what do we do? How do we stop avoiding these things in our lives? And like everything else I speak about, there is no secret. I'm speaking with you to encourage you and to provide a reminder because we often need someone to remind us of what we already know. People often listen to podcasts or go to conferences and listen to people speak looking for a magical treatment or an earth-shattering revelation, but you hold the secret to your success. I don't know your story. I don't know your life. It's up to you to make that change, to stop avoiding whatever it is that you're avoiding. If you wait for someone else to solve your problems, you're only going to be let down. I've waited for someone else to swoop in and solve my problems for me, and it just doesn't happen. I often wait for someone else to reach out to me to provide help, or somebody to come to me asking for help themselves. But I keep waiting and I'm only left disappointed. So don't wait for someone else to take control of your life. Take the initiative and take control of your life. Nobody wants to live your life for you, and trust me, you don't want them to. So go out and live your life with purpose, which is going to be the topic for my next episode. So until then, God bless.
Thank you for joining me at The Fight with Depression. If you'd like to hear more, please follow this podcast or join me at thefightwithdepression.com. Remember, you are not in this fight alone, and let's continue to fight this good fight together.